Okay, this presentation is about Checkmk and Netdata and host and service monitoring. Like most projects, they start with a request. In this case, sometimes it might be a fairly overwhelming, loud, resounding request. We need monitoring now. Existing monitoring that we have doesn't tell me anything. We're not getting alerts for common problems. We're not able to be proactive, etc., etc. I want better reporting. I want better alerting. I want better trending, etc., etc. And it can be quite overwhelming. In fact, you might feel like you're diving into the depths of a deep, deep unknown, and you can't see where you're going because it's so dark and murky. But you have to start somewhere. So you come up with your ideas and you start making notes on what you think you need to do, and then of course you're going to start wanting to gather in some requirements. Here's what we need to do, here are some requirements, and you're going to start getting feedback from other people. They're going to suggest tools, or you may have used tools. You may have heard of tools, and some of these may be very old or very popular, and so you're going to look at those things, but at the same time you don't want to get too sidetracked. The requirements can be so daunting that the list can look overwhelming, and you feel like you're not going to be able to answer or provide a solution for everybody's requirements. And we have this pharmacy slash convenience store called CVS. And CVS, when you buy just like a single item, sometimes they'll print out a receipt, and the receipt will be like 3 or 4 feet long. I mean, to the point where they have to take some time to roll it up and put it into the bag for your single package of gum. And so it's become kind of a thing to make fun of. So this slide about the sun is only 8 CVS receipts from the earth is somewhat humorous if you have a CVS. People talk about, the complexity of what you monitor, and I thought this was a good illustration. This guy's pointing to this big dashboard that he has up with all these graphs and charts and diagrams and things, and says, after careful consideration of all 437 charts, graphs, and metrics, I decided to throw up my hands, hit the liquor store, and get snookered. Who's with me? And indeed, it can seem that way as well. The other side of the fence is people are just looking for something that's flashy or pretty, that demos really well, and there's a lot of people out there, a lot of systems out there that do this, and so managers are going to say, I want this one because it looks the best, but it doesn't really tell you anything. Or is it just, pretty, but you're like, I don't even know what this is telling me. And so it can be very confusing even if it looks good. What you certainly don't want to do is design something or implement something that was meant to be used in a certain way, only to find out that, after it's all said and done, it doesn't function just right. And this is the Boeing 737 MAX, which at the time, when it came out, they basically had some gigantic new engines. That was the MAX part that they wanted to strap onto it that would help with fuel economy and allow it to travel, better, more economical, longer distances and things like that. But they didn't want to rebody the plane. They didn't want to retool the plane design any. So they kind of, roughly took a shot at putting these engines on there, and it ended up making this plane, top heavy, nose heavy, so much to the point where they had to develop special software to help the plane correct itself in certain situations beyond the pilot's control. Kind of like, how your car might have some kind of sensor or feature to automatically brake to keep you from hitting something. And so, I don't know what you think about designs like that, but when you have to correct because the car or whatever is no longer, you can't see, and the mirrors aren't good enough, and your driving skills aren't good enough, and you have to correct things, I think it's overkill. What you don't want to do is design something you think is elegant And at the end of the day, you end up with a duck. And you say, well, ducks are nice, but in the United States, anyway, with USA football, duck is the name for an errant quarterback pass that just kind of floats and flops up in the air and usually ends up in the hands of the other team. So anyway, so what are you going to do? You know, where do you begin? What do you start? Well, I think you got to get some focus. I'm sorry, not that kind of focus, but you got to narrow your requirements down, figure out the key things you want to focus on, you know, what's really the items that you just must have, and then see if you can fill in the rest of the blanks later. While you're out there exploring all these options that everyone's going to be throwing inside your face, you're going to hear like some common things from all these vendors, and they're trying to sell you on why their products or tools are best. Our approach is modern, it's easy to configure, integrates into your favorite dashboards. But one of my favorite statements as I was looking at all these different tools and talking to all these different vendors was they almost always came back to one thing when it came to alerting. They would say, for notifications, integrates with Nagios. And I was thinking to myself, if Nagios is the thing that's kind of old school that we're trying to migrate away from, how come everybody's saying that in order to have good notifications, we need to throw things into Nagios again? And it seemed kind of wrong to me to have Nagios stick around, no longer doing the monitoring, have someone else's tool do the monitoring, but yet for alerting, we're going to rifle those requests through Nagios. It just didn't seem to make much sense to me. But at the end of the day, it really is all about the notifications. Monitoring, while it can be pretty and show up charts and dashboards and things of that nature, really what you're interested in is being notified about when there are problems. So you want to have a system that can send out notification alerts and customize the alerts, you know, based on your preferences. You want dashboard summaries of those alerts, the ability to clear and ignore alerts. That's key. You don't want machine gun notifications. You want flap control, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And you don't want your system crying wolf all the time, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. So machine gunning is when you have a service that you're monitoring that's going from one state to another state very quickly. So imagine, for example, a temperature control that's going between a threshold of being too hot and normal. And if it's bouncing between those states in rapid succession, do you really want all the alerts? You know, you don't want to come in the next morning and find your mailbox with 13,678 alerts. And your boss probably doesn't want to see that in his email box if he's getting those alerts. So that's kind of like that machine gunning process. Your monitor needs to be able to detect when the problem is happening, send out a couple of alerts, figure out it is changing between two states, and control that and say, I'm not going to send out any more alerts until this device stops flapping between the two states. Then once the flapping does stabilize, that it actually maintains state for a period of time, you can then send an alert saying, okay, it's not flapping anymore, we're at a steady state, everything goes back to normal again. But anyway, you just want to limit the amount of alerting that's caused by that. On this alerting thing, it's kind of funny when you talk about crying wolf. This guy's t-shirt, he's wearing a t-shirt that says, being a sysadmin, Nagios texts me more than my wife. And so the problem with getting tons and tons and tons of alerts, and I'm not saying that that's what this young man is getting, but the problem with sending out too many alerts over something is that you'll tend to ignore the alerting system. Because is everything really, you know, something that I need to handle? If I'm sending out too many alerts, over time you will tend to just ignore any alert that comes out. You'll rifle everything into a mailbox, if not delete them altogether, and you won't pay attention. And then it's like, well, if no one's paying attention to the alerting, then we're going to miss things. Here's the short list that I came up with regards to what I wanted to be able to focus on. I want something that can monitor anything. So we need something that's capable of the whole broad spectrum of devices and types. So everything from cameras to environmental controls to network switches to the normal computing devices that you might have on your network and the services that are contained. Flexible alerting, again, not just all that nice flapping control and things like that, but the ability to actually control what alerts I can see or I'm interested in. And the ability, what I think would be really nice is if something can tell you, you know, you get these set of 12 alerts, and then I can personally say, I'm only interested in 8 of those, even though I'm in that same group as a lot of other people. I'm really not interested in these 2. They don't really apply to me, so I can take those out. So it's nice to have flexible alerting where it's individually controlled as well as group controlled at the same time, and you can actually make decisions. I wanted to have monitoring that was also live, sub-second, so something that makes a very interactive live view at any given time. Some things can only be seen really well in a live scenario, like when the problem's actually occurring, and because intervals on longer term monitoring, the interval might be too long. But I am interested in long-term data because long-term data is how I do my trending. That's how I can actually visually see something over time. And so I am interested in that long-term data as well. I need a system that's easy to use and customize. And by that, I mean I want to be able to add new things to it to be monitored, but I would also love for it to automatically figure out what services are running on the thing that I'm asking it to monitor, and monitoring those services automatically rather than me having to configure each one individually. But with regards to that, I would love a system where I can add in my own hooks and design my own enhancements and easily expand what it's able to do. So that's also interesting. And then have it to be fairly cheap or even free would just be a bonus on top of everything else. I put this picture up here. This is my cats. And I think that, the neat part about cats, if you don't know anything about cats, is that cats spend a lot of their time sleeping. And so I like to be lazy like a cat. I like solutions that don't make me work so hard to put together the solution. If adding a new host or a new device or new whatever to be monitored requires a lot of work effort on my part, to me that's not something that I want. I want something where I can just kind of lay back, hit a button, configure it up, and walk away. I'm wanting to be lazy like a cat. So that's kind of another one of my requirements with regards to that ease. The tool choices we made for this to get us that ease and cat-like ability, but also lots of flexibility, is Checkmk for alerting and our long-term trending, and Netdata for our live, right up to the second live monitoring. Those are the 2 choices we made. Checkmk has support for thousands of devices. It can auto-discover new and changed items on monitored devices. It has so many different ways of getting monitoring data to it, whether it be by agent, SNMP, trap data, syslog, old school Nagios checks. It does push, it does pull. You can time services. You can set up scheduled downtimes. You can. There's just so much inside with regards to the monitoring inside Checkmk. So it's very easy to override and extend, so you can add plugins and you can override existing checks if you feel like they're slightly in error, or if you want to just test out if you can expand or enhance an existing check. So it's very customizable with regards to alerting, which I mentioned before, the ability to not only receive messages because I'm on a particular group, but then they go beyond that and say, well, here's something I'm not on the group for, but I'd like to be alerted about it anyway. I could add that in. Or I could actually say, here's something I'm being alerted on, and I'm really not interested in it, so please don't send me these alerts anymore. And so you've got that kind of customization, and it doesn't have to be by email. These could be customizations for how I get my alerts. I want alerts via email, or maybe I need them as a text message, or sent to some kind of other service like Slack or a Teams channel or something like that. So I want alerting options, but I also want individual user control of that. It has user integration with LDAP, which was important for us, so it can work with our Active Directory, so that as new users come and go on our company, it can keep up to date with access to the system. And Checkmk is also very reasonable open source, has a reasonable open source version called Raw, and they have a very good and responsive community. So people in the Checkmk world are wanting to help you solve your problems or help you with your monitoring needs. Netdata, on the other hand, this is the one that's very high speed, up to the minute real time, and it has fantastic Linux. I said Unix also, but mainly Linux support. In fact, most of the features are completely tailored for Linux, and it's very deep. So when you monitor a Linux host, you're going to get thousands of graphs, thousands of things being monitored. It's really amazing, and it can do that all on a single web page, and it won't skip a beat. There's not like delay or latency, because it's only drawing the graphs that are actually physically viewable on your browser at any given time. It's not trying to draw all the graphs all the time, only the ones that are available, but it's all on one page, so it gives you the essence that they're all updating it all at the same time. And it's coordinated, so if you hover into one graph, they all pause. If you zoom in, they all zoom in. So it's very, very interesting in that regard. It's pretty easy to create custom dashboards for Netdata, but you do have to do that in HTML. So there's not like a graphical dashboard builder. It is also open source and also has a good community. So it's also part of the Cloud Foundation effort, and so Netdata it's gaining in popularity. In my opinion, it's still got a ways to mature, but so it's still got some stability issues. Still does some things incorrectly. Its alerting is poor, but again, we're not relying on it for alerting. Its long-term storage or trending capability is new-ish, and again, we're not going to be using it for that. But they are adding more. Netdata is adding more features for long-term network monitoring, while Checkmk might be adding more features for real-time. So how's this all going to be received? Well, this is what I hear from people. I don't want to see all this. That's what my manager says. I send alerts to him, and he sees all the things they're alerting, and a lot of it was real. So it's not just call a crying wolf kind of things, but there are some things that are crying wolf, and we have to go in and make our own tunings and adjustments. But a lot of times, these are just real alerts. These are the kind of things we have to deal with on a daily basis. And he's like, that's too much. I don't want to see all this. Well, in all fairness, it's not probably necessary to send the manager all the alerts. It's just that first he's going to want to see them all, and then he's going to say this is too overwhelming. Then you'll get the response, something bad happened and we didn't get an alert. So that's the cases where either they're not on the list for a particular alert, or we're just not monitoring it yet. And so we may have to augment or make some adjustments or build our own custom plugin so that we can get alerts on things that were being missed before. You're the only one who knows how to operate these things. That's another phrase that you'll hear. That's true about a lot of things. And in all fairness, complexity-wise, I think a person that's having to do Microsoft Windows administration with registry edits and group policy objects is much more complicated, convoluted, and to me, if you can handle that, you have absolutely no problem with Checkmk. And why aren't we looking at alternatives? I can't believe you're going to get asked this question, because you went through a lot of the research, you looked at a lot of the different tools, you made your decision about what you're going to use for monitoring, and for them to come back and say, why aren't you looking at alternatives? That just goes to the fact that we live in a very tech-centric world, and these new companies that spring up all the time do an exceptional job with marketing, and they present themselves well, sometimes with flashy demos, quick videos, things that speak to managers and make them say, well, why aren't we using this? It's new, it's fresh, and it's awesome, so we should be able to use it. But a lot of times, of course, they're very expensive, and all they do is take your money and deliver very little in return. So anyway, but you are going to have that. You're going to have people ask you, why aren't we looking at alternatives? At this point in time, because of those kind of things, you might feel like you've entered the pit of despair. This is a scene from Princess Bride where our hero is in the dungeon about to be tortured. And so you may feel that way. Why went through all this effort, and I find myself now in the pit of despair. But here's the things that they don't know. So for all the criticism, what you've been able to do now is you've been able to avoid crisis by having monitoring and alerting problems that might have ended up eventually taking down systems, causing massive downtime, corruptions. These are going to be detected early enough on to be addressed and avoid a bigger crisis that's happening down the road. You're also going to have errors that are corrected. So as you have monitoring and alerting, what you're going to discover is where you have things that need to be shored up, things that are like configuration issues. So maybe you're seeing some alerts, but the alerts are being sent out because you've got something that's configured not quite right. So you're going to be able to correct errors in your networks and your configurations in your systems to be able to make them work better. Things that maybe you weren't seeing before, but were actually out there and the real problems were happening. You just weren't aware of it. You're going to have anomalies tracked because it has long-term graphing capabilities, and it records all of the monitoring alerts that have been sent out. You'll be able to look at things. You'll be able to look at like your availability for services and hosts, and you'll be able to see like when anomalies happen and how the system behaves, and you'll have just better tracking of that kind of information. So if someone comes back and says, what happened a month ago at 3 p.m., you'll be able to actually go back and produce some data about that and show them, here's what was happening. So you've got that kind of tracking, to go back in history. Hacks prevented because, so that was another option, so you're going to have hacks that are prevented. In other words, your monitoring tools are now going to be able to alert you about things that are happening, potential bad actors on your network, and you'll be able to respond to it rather than letting someone brute force their way into something, right? And so monitoring can really help. And by the way, I added this to the slide deck because we actually had this exact problem happen to us, where we were able to prevent a bad actor that was acting on our network. And it's actually caused by a misconfigured firewall rule that was allowing access to something that the internet community should not have had access to. The other thing is glorious uptime, the ability to keep your systems running, staying up longer without outage. That's key. That's kind of like the end goal. All this monitoring and alerting allows you to build better, safer, better configured, and systems that you can respond to as needed quickly to address and prevent downtime. And then finally, more and more things are now being monitored. And the more things you monitor, in my opinion, the better off you are. And while that sounds like, well, that's overload, I'm monitoring too many things, in my opinion, there's you can't monitor too many things because there's too many things that can go wrong and they kind of cause a cascade of problems. So the more things that you're monitoring, the better off you're going to be in the long run, especially with regards to real problems. I'm not talking about things that cry wolf. You want to address those things, but just you want everything that can alert to alert you, so that you can take action. So I don't know. When I look at all this, and I get down to the end of the day with the solutions of Checkmk and Netdata, it seems to me like we've got things pretty well covered, and we should be pretty pleased with our monitoring. So, in my opinion, we're right where we need to be, despite any kind of criticism that you might hear. But I want to mention some other things before we get to the demo. What is being monitored? Your monitoring engine, your monitoring solution, ideally needs to reside as far away outside of what it's monitoring. If your monitor is sitting too low in the stack of things, because problems can happen higher up in your infrastructure stack. As those things go down, your monitoring system may not be able to effectively monitor. It certainly can't, might not be able to send out alerts. So the higher up you can put your monitoring in in your infrastructure stack, the better off you are. So the more out of band it is from what's being monitored, the better. And there's lots of ways to make things really complex and get very small gains. So you need to weigh the value of any complexity you choose to add. In my opinion, be like a cat. So I'm not telling you, your boss says, hey, I want this monitored, it's not monitored. And you say, well, that plugin doesn't exist. It's going to take a lot of work effort to do. And at the end of the day, it's for an alert that he didn't really care about. Then maybe we don't do that one, you know. So you got to measure and take action on the things that get you the most gain for the workload. And Checkmk and Netdata both provide a lot of stuff with doing very, very, very little effort. Also share, when you do make customization, share that information with the community, whether it be on Netdata or Checkmk. They both have communities, and I encourage you to share what you've done with others, because it might help them. You may be monitoring a device that's never been monitored before, and you may find there's lots of other people who have that exact same device. So anything that you do to help out with the monitoring of those kind of things, share that with the rest of the community. You may have a dashboard that works really well, or you may have a configuration way of configuring things that helps you organize your monitoring better. Those kind of things can help the community to grow and get better ideas. So with that said, that's the end of the presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.